Good evening, day walkers and night stalkers. It's me, your twisted southern horror queen, coming to you live from under a full moon right here in southeastern Louisiana, where it's trying really hard to feel like Halloween season. That's right, we don't have fall here, we don't have autumn. What the hell is all that about? It's Halloween season! Get it right. So, big shout out to all you folks here on Facebook tuning in, and another huge shout out to the Edge Radio US listeners as well as iHeartRadio. Thank you guys for tuning in. Michelle is already in the house. She's here early, boys. That's right, get an eyeful of her. She's a beautiful girl. Sorry, Michelle, had to do that. John, good to see you, sweetheart. Thank you for tuning in this week. We got all kinds of crazy haunted history to talk about. But before we do, you know how I roll. Got to give those shout outs to the sponsors. I'm going to start out this week with Wrought Ink. That's right. Find them at authorlyngibson.com. Shop on their Etsy page. I showed you the Axeman shirt last week. This is my Rougarou shirt. Yes, indeed. You all know about the Rougarou legend. That's the Louisiana version of a werewolf. He's badass, too. Check them out on Etsy. Use code HorrorQueen. Get 10% off your entire order. You're going to order something, I guarantee you. As soon as you browse through their inventory, you're going to find something that you've got to have. Also, copy shop of horrors. You can find them on authorlyngibson.com as well. Shop on their site, use code EDGE2020 and get 10% off your entire order. Remember, if you're waking up in the morning, you're drinking your coffee and you're not leaving a wet spot, you're drinking the wrong coffee. And our friends at Big Time Vapes in Picayune, Mississippi, you can find them at 711 Memorial Boulevard. They're there to help you kick the habit, and they can do it with the right mod, the right flavors, the right juice, you name it, they've got it. It's in stock, and if it ain't, they'll make it for you right there on the spot. Find them here on Facebook. Check them out and say hello to Belinda and the girls over there. Also, Hawaiian Island Shine. Last week of promoting the Diamond Shine Car Wax. I love this stuff. I cannot brag on it enough. Goes on easy, comes off even easier, and leaves your car looking really slick for quite a while. It lasts way longer than any other wax I have ever used. And trust me, I am a Nazi with my car. I can't say enough about Hawaiian Island Shine products. They are freaking incredible. And last but certainly not least, not ever least, maybe less and less and less, but that's all right. There's always more. Because I've got $100 vouchers. That's right, get $100 off your first case of Naked Wines. Open your door and have a case of wine sitting there waiting for you. Nothing better. Holiday season, folks. That's a great little stocking stuffer. If you want that code, let me know. Reach out to me here on Facebook. I'll give it to you. Y'all are my buds. I'll hook you guys up. No problem. Karen Mathis, my twisted sister. Beautiful girl in the house. Char Harden, fellow twisted sister as well. Ed Miller, good evening to you as well. Are the books on sale yet? They go on sale October 1. Stay tuned right here on my Facebook page. If you're also on my personal page, you'll see it there. Doing some special pricing, shipping included. If Halloween's going to suck this year, stay at home, drink a bottle of Naked Wines, and read a fantastic horror book. I've got those for you. Just don't look at me funny after you read my books. You just have no idea the kind of things that roll through this twisted little mind of mine. Holly, good to see you, sweetheart. Greg Hartman is also in the house. Glad to see you this evening. Wanda Heron, beautifully representing Pearl River County. My boy Gavin Williams in Newfoundland. Nice to see you, dear. Sandra Spiegel. Freddie Roseman's in the house. What, they let you escape work long enough to tune in? That's awesome. Miss Janice, glad to have you as always. Look there in the comments. Freddie's already got the link to authorlyngibson.com up. It's because he's awesome like that. One of my absolute favorite anime artists on the entire planet. He is some kind of talented. April, nice to see you, sweetheart. Hope you're feeling well. Let's see who else we got here. Look, he's got everything out. Creepy Crate. Oh, you're just so awesome. Naked Wines as well. You won't find that discount code on Naked Wines site, though. You got to get that directly from me. So holla, and I'll hook you up with that. All right, folks, we're going to get everything rolling as soon as I get my scroll bar to work the way I want it to, because I want to see what you guys are saying. I'm sure I'm going to miss on something. Amanda, nice to see you. She's hanging out with us from New York, the Big Apple. All right, folks, so we're going to get rolling this evening. Friend of the show, Jesse Donaldson, messaged me maybe a couple weeks ago. Oh, time escapes me. But he asked me if I would look into the haunted history of Cahaba, Alabama. So, of course, I did. And you know what? I found all kinds of crazy ghost legends there. So, yeah, we're going to spend a little bit of time in Alabama this evening, folks. Let's get a little bit more familiar with the history here first, so we know what's going down there in Cahaba. So it was actually situated between the Cahaba and the Alabama rivers at around 1819, and it was built on the remnants of an even earlier ghost town. The spot was originally settled by native Indians, and their village dated way back into the 16th century, y'all, way back. So the presiding governor at that time, William Wyatt Bibb, was hell-bent on building Alabama's first state house directly on top of a 300-year-old Indian mound. We know what happens when you do that, don't we? So by the 1800s, this joint was one of the wealthiest spots in the United States. The entire industry there was basically cotton, and it was just booming. And being right there in the middle of those two rivers, it had some certain good points, had bad points too. Trust me, I know about rivers and what they do, especially in the spring. Anyway, they were able to help ship those bales of cotton out, and so they could make a little bit of money on their produce coming from out of the area. So things continued to boom until a little while after 1826, and that's when the state capital was moved to Tuscaloosa. So a lot of the rich folks decided that they were going to move along with it. So now Cahaba is dying, and folks are doing their damnedest trying to keep commerce rolling. And of course, then comes the Civil War, right? Well, with not much else going on in the way of industry, the massive cotton factory became a prison for Union soldiers that were captured there by the Confederates. Well, after the war, old Cahaba was settled and emancipated by slaves, and then again it became a booming metropolis. But by the 1890s, it was a ghost town, just like the ghost town it had been built on. Today, it's known as Alabama's most famous and most haunted ghost town. One of the oldest legends here is of Colonel C.C. Pegg. And the colonel, he was the head of the Alabama's 5th Rifle Regiment during the war. And he was pretty well known and admired by the community. And it's said that his estate was like the social center of town. It was absolutely beautiful. Manicured lawn, gardens, of course, in only the finest materials, building materials you could get your hands on back in the day. So, yeah, he had these huge parties here, and folks used to just meet out there and hang up and all that good stuff. Well, he was killed in battle in 1862, and around that same time as when he made his first ghostly appearance. The first accounting of his ghost goes a little something like this. So shortly after Pegg was KIA, this young couple's out behind his house, and they're taking a little romantic moonlight stroll in his beautiful garden that he had. It was like the pride of the area. So, yeah, they're just walking around looking at the stars and all that good stuff. And all of a sudden, they're getting close to this cluster of cedar trees, and they see this white orb coming toward them. So they stand there and they watch it for a few minutes, and it's just kind of there hanging out with them. Well, out of curiosity, they try to reach out and touch it, and of course, it disappears into the surrounding bushes. So eventually, they decide to start walking again, and again, here comes this orb, and it's just kind of floating there beside them, chaperoning them, if you will. So again, they try to touch it, and of course, it darts off into the bushes. So this goes on for quite a while, but eventually the orb got tired. Old Colonel had other things to deal with, I assume, and they gave up on seeing it again during their walk. So the Colonel is still making appearances today. He is still showing up right there where his garden used to be in the form of an orb. But there are other legends that say that you can hear him sitting by the remnants of what used to be a fireplace at one of the main estates there as well. He's having a conversation with someone, but all you can hear is his side of the conversation, his voice. So, pretty cool little visit there if you get a chance to do that. Now, there's also a couple of cemeteries here, too. Um, it doesn't look like much the way it is right now. You walk through the woods, you see this little dirt path, and I don't know, maybe half a dozen little headstones are poking up out of the dirt. But the kicker here is there are hundreds and hundreds of past residents there taking a dirt nap. You'd never know it because the markers are missing. So plenty of investigations have taken place in these old boneyards, and there's been all kinds of photos of misty figures and orbs, as well as recordings of folks talking and children playing. Got to keep in mind, back in the day, there were all these plagues and everything, COVID. So a lot of kids and old people died back in the day as well. Now, the groundskeepers back in the day, when they were trying to keep the place up, said that it was not unusual for them to go in the evenings and carry on a conversation the whole time they're there with the folks that are buried there. So one grave in particular they like to talk about, that is the grave of Augustus Hatcher Jackson. That's poor bastard right here. So Jackson had enlisted when the Civil War began. Now, the official records say that Private Jackson died on a farm somewhere just outside of Knoxville, Tennessee on November 9th, 1862. Now, he was with Bragg's army, and at that time he was very ill. He was suffering from dysentery. But here's the actual horrific backstory here. So, legend has it that Jackson was sick and he was taken to this farm for help. Well, his brother went off as soon as he drops him off there to go find a doctor for him. But when he gets back with the doctor, the owners of the farm had buried his brother. Well, apparently Jackson wasn't that sick when he was dropped off there, and his brother started suspecting the owners of the farm of being abolitionists. So he goes and digs up his brother, and sure enough, it had become more than apparent that Jackson was buried alive. But he did die while he was buried. And there was plenty of evidence of him having tried to claw his way out of the grave. That sucks so bad. That's why I say cremate my ass. Anyway, this dude, he is still pissed off today. His grave is very, very active. And even though he's long dead, he has no problem rising from his grave these days. Now, only a handful of the original buildings remain there. Years and years of decay and abandonment, and of course floods from the two surrounding rivers have pretty much done a number on the old capital. But many of the original residents are quite content to remain there in their own stomping grounds. So thank you for that, Jesse. That was a pretty cool read, doing the research on that. Let me see if there's anybody I can shout out to real quick before we move on. Glenn, nice to see you. What's flavor this evening? April said, feeling much better now. I can hear your voice. Oh, you're such a sweetheart. Thank you, April. We love you here at the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show. William Drexler, nice to see you, sweetheart. Thank you very much. Audrey, nice to have you joining in. Jerry Rob, what's up, Biscuit? John Biggins says, wow, what a terrible way to die. Definitely. And I think that's about it. I've given pretty much all the shout outs for right now. You guys keep conversing there on the side. You make it very interesting for me as well. All right, so while we're in Alabama, I took a look at a couple of other haunted joints that I wanted to tell you about. And this is pretty tragic as well. In Pickens County, there's an old haunted courthouse, and here's a tale behind it. See, according to legend, this dude named Henry Wells, he was a former slave who was freed at the end of the Civil War. Well, he had been accused of arson when the Pickens County courthouse burned. That was on November 16, 1876. So, as the story goes, Henry runs into the attic of the courthouse while he was escaping the mob that was out to lynch him. Well, as they continued their search for him, Henry is looking out the attic window down at the mob below, and he starts screaming, I'm innocent, and if you kill me, I'm going to haunt you for the rest of your lives. Well, at that very second, The second those words crossed his lips, lightning strikes the window where he's standing, and the image of Henry's face was etched into the glass. That is one of the photos on tonight's teaser on Facebook, so check that out. It's pretty freaking cool. So the mob finally makes their way into the courthouse and they force Henry to go outside. Of course, they lynched him. So today, the face in the window remains a reminder of that fateful night. It's been washed, it's been scraped, it's been pressure washed countless times, but the face will not go away. Henry warned those folks that he was going to haunt them forever if they killed him. And so far, he's done a pretty incredible job of keeping his word. Next up, there's Fort Morgan. That's at the mouth of Mobile Bay. So the construction of Fort Morgan began in 1819 and it was completed around 1834. Its unique star shape makes it much easier to defend, and back in the day it was actually considered the finest example of military architecture in the New World. So during the Civil War, Fort Morgan got the shit kicked out of it. These Union soldiers set the fort on fire during the Battle of Mobile Bay. A lot of folks died there either because of the fire or from being fired upon by the Union marksmen. So as you can imagine, there's a ton of ghosts still hanging out there today. And one of the most haunted spots here is the old barracks. See, in 1917, this prisoner committed suicide by hanging himself in his cell. Ever since then, a whole lot of folks have reported hearing him crying during the late night hours. Also during the Civil War, a bomb goes off in a room of the fort. It killed a whole lot of men there too. Now these men can still be heard screaming in the dead of night, but the ghost that most folks encounter here is not a soldier, it's not a prisoner, it's not anybody who had anything to do with the war as far as we know. It's the spirit of a young woman. This chick was attacked here sometime during the 19th century, and according to local lore, she's still roaming Fort Morgan looking for her attacker. All she wants is justice. They say justice, I say vengeance. 6 one way, half a dozen the other, right? All right, another place in Alabama to check out, because this joint here is still standing as well. The St. James Hotel in Selma was originally built in 1837. It opened up as the Brantley. Now today it's considered to be one of the most haunted places in the entire state of Alabama. Many visitors have reported these ghostly encounters and other paranormal occurrences, and the hotel, like I said, is still standing today. It sits in the center of the historic district, of course, overlooking the famous Alabama River. So during the Civil War, the Brantley was occupied by Union troops. That was during the Battle of Selma, of course. There were a lot of Confederate arsenals and factories that were there in that area, and the Union soldiers were taken to burning down most of the city just to make sure they got all their goods. So fortunately, the St. James and a few other structures on Water Street were spared, of course, because they were staying there. Well, after the war, the hotel was operated by Benjamin Sterling Turner. He was the first African American ever elected to the United States Congress. Now, legend has it that he hosted the legendary outlaw brothers Frank and Jesse James in 1881. And in 1892, the hotel fell upon hard times and it ceased operations. So the doors were closed and they weren't reopened for over a century. That's because a group of investors came in, they bought this old hotel, and they put somewhere around $6 million worth of restorations into this building. And then they were officially reopened in 1997 as the St. James Hotel. You guys listening to me? Yeah, another hotel that goes through renovations. So, of course, since reopening, two of the most reported hauntings in the hotel include Jesse James and his girlfriend Lucinda. Now, several folks have claimed to have seen the apparition of a man that's dressed in attire that was common in the late 1800s. And if you look real close at some of those pictures, damn sure looks like old pictures of Jesse James to me. Google that, folks, because you can see a few of his ghostly images there as far as Google St. James Selma ghost photos and see if you don't see what I see. Okay, so yes, it's of course believed that that is the spirit of Jesse James. Now, he's most often seen in the rooms which he typically stayed in. He was a creature of habit. He stayed in either 214, 314, or 315. However, he has also been sighted sitting at his favorite table in the bar. Go figure. So, Jesse's lady friend, Lucinda, she had a thing for the scent of lavender. Folks back in the day knew that if they smelled it, she wasn't too far away. Now, today, several witnesses claim that they're able to smell lavender with no logical explanation whatsoever, other than Lucinda is visiting. So, in other instances, they have seen a full apparition of Lucinda that's said to be walking the halls of the structure. That is another picture that is on the teaser for tonight's stream, so check that out. That's a good little shot of Lucinda. So in the area of the courtyard, a whole lot of weird things have been reported. First off, several witnesses have observed what appears to be a residual haunting of individuals who were fully clothed and dressed that was, of course, common in the 1800s. And they seem absolutely unaware of the living surrounding them. For you folks that aren't familiar with a residual haunting, it's like a clip from an old movie that just replays and replays and replays. But it's something that spirit did and continues to come back and relive that segment of their life over and over and over and over and over and over again for some reason. Now, additionally, the sounds of apparent ghost dogs can be heard in the area. If you didn't know it, Jesse James, some said, once owned a black dog, and it was his companion for many years. So many guests at the St. James have reported hearing a dog running up and down the halls. Also, guests in the hotel would often complain about a dog that would bark nonstop in the courtyard. So when management would go down to check out their complaint, of course, no dog was ever found in the courtyard. Let's check in and see who else has joined us real quick before we move on. Stacy Abernathy, friend of the Twisted Southern Horror Queen show. It is her birthday. Happy birthday, my girl. Everybody wish her well this day. It's her special day. I hope you have a nice bottle of wine or something alcoholic there beside you. William, angry artist in the house. William Russell, that's right. We've done a couple cons together. Nice to see you, my dear. He has some incredible horror images. You definitely check out his work. Ed Miller says, hard place to get any sleep. Damn straight. Stacy said he couldn't decide which room to stay in, which room he wanted to stay in. That's exactly right. So, here's a shocker for you. And we just talked about the St. James Hotel in Selma. But there's a whole other St. James Hotel that I'm going to tell you guys about as well. That's the St. James Hotel in Cimarron, New Mexico. And that one was built in 1872 by this dude named Henry Lambert. So it was originally called Lambert's Inn. There was a saloon, a restaurant, and 43 rooms, which was a huge hotel back in the day. This joint was the site of at least 26 murders during the Cimarron's wilder days. Clay Allison, Blackjack Ketchum, Jesse James, and Buffalo Bill Cody have all left their mark here, along with James, as attested by numerous bullet holes in the ceiling of the main dining room. We're going to get to that in a minute. So let's take a closer look at Henry Lambert. Very interesting gentleman there. Before Henry made his way to New Mexico, he was the personal chef to President Abraham Lincoln, who had referred him to Lincoln. Well, that was none other than Ulysses S. Grant. Yeah, because he was his chef as well. So this dude holds that position until the president was assassinated in 1865. Well, after that, Henry went west in search of gold. But instead, he winds up settling in Elizabethtown, New Mexico, where he opens a saloon and a restaurant instead of panning for gold. Because somebody had to feed all those miners, right? Dude was smart. So back then, Elizabethtown, Cimarron, and most of the surrounding area was owned by this dude named Lucian B. Maxwell. The Maxwell land grant was the largest land grant ever made in the United States. And when Maxwell sold the grant in 1870, the new land grant company They discovered that the French chef, Henry Lambert, was working in Elizabethtown, and they enticed him to come into Cimarron. So the Lambert Inn was up and rolling by 1872. But so was the crime rate. There were thugs running rampant all over the place. So that saloon quickly gained the reputation as a very violent place. The first question asked over folks' morning coffee was typically, who got killed at Lambert's last night? It's kind of like talking about Nola. So the saloon was the happening place, whether you were a cowboy, a trader, a miner, or just somebody passing through on the Santa Fe Trail. That saloon did so well that Henry wound up adding more guest rooms in 1880, and he spruced things up a little bit too. So at that point, the Lambert was then considered to be one of the most elegant hotels west of the Mississippi River. A lot of upper crust folks stayed here too, like Wyatt Earp and his brother Morgan and their wives, and Jesse James stayed there several times, always in room 14. He has a thing for 14, right? He always signed in the registry as his alias R.H. Howard. Jesse James' nemesis and would-be killer Bob Ford also stayed here. Buffalo Bill Cody met Annie Oakley at this hotel, and that's where they started planning and rehearsing for their Wild West show. Well, when Henry's son Fred was born, Buffalo Bill, his godfather, named him Cyclone Dick because he was born during a snowstorm. Buffalo Bill taught Fred how to use his guns when he was a little bit older, and Fred went on to be a Cimarron sheriff, a member of the tribal police, and a territorial marshal. Other well-known folks who stayed there were folks like Bat Masterson and train robber Blackjack Tom Ketchum, General Sheridan, Doc Holliday, Billy the Kid, Clay Allison, Pat Garrett, artist Frederick Remington, Governor Lew Wallace, and writer Zane Grey. Definitely some of the most elite folks of the day went and stayed at this hotel. So, of course, things always change, and here came the railroad. So when they came through, the Santa Fe Trail just died. Finding gold in the area also played itself out at about the same time too. So Cimarron's population starts to dwindle, and of course the St. James Hotel starts falling into disrepair. Well, when Henry Lambert's sons, Fred and Jean, replaced the roof in the Lambert Inn in 1901, they found more than 400 bullet holes in the ceiling above the bar. A double layer of heavy wood prevented anyone that was sleeping in the floors above them from being shot and killed. So today the ceiling in the dining room, it has of course been refurbished, but there are still 22 definite bullet holes that are seen there. We'll talk about that a little bit more later too. So Henry Lambert died in 1913, and his wife Mary, she died in 1926. So through the years, the old hotel was at many times uninhabited and passed from owner to owner. However, in 1985, the St. James Hotel was restored. So the hotel is said to remain host to several restless spirits. Both the owners and guests of the hotel will tell you that it is way haunted. Several psychics have gone in and they've visited, and they have specifically identified 3 spirits, as well as many others who just passed through and kind of relived their experiences there. Leanne, nice to see you tonight, sweetheart. So they say that the second floor of the hotel is the most active. That's where there's cold spots and the smell of cigar smoke lingering in the halls, which that's really weird because smoking is not allowed in the hotel. You must vape. A prior manager said that if you don't always see them, but you always do feel and hear them. Another report from a former owner states that she had walked into the dining room and she saw this cowboy standing behind her in the mirror that sits on the front of the bar. And room 18 at the hotel is kept locked because it houses the ghost of a very ill-tempered Thomas James Wright. This dude got shot at his door just after winning the rights to the hotel in a poker game. He was shot from behind, so Wright just kind of stumbled right on into the room, collapsed, and slowly bled to death right there in his favorite room. So Wright's angry and rather malevolent ghost continues to haunt the room and does not like company. One former owner said that went in there and she got pushed down, And other folks that have gone in there, they see this ball of angry looking orange light that just kind of floats right up there in one of the upper corners of the room. The room holds only a bed frame without a mattress, a modest coat rack, a rocking chair, and a bureau, which has kind of been made like a shrine to the Old West. And sitting on top of that bureau is a bottle of Jack Daniels, a basin and a pitcher, a hand of cards, an Ace Copenhagen tin, and several shot glasses, just to keep him, you know, happy, maybe. On the wall, there's also, of course, a very bad painting of a half-naked woman. What hotel that was made back in the day doesn't have bad paintings of half-naked women? Anyway, this room is considered by the staff to be the most haunted, and people are rarely allowed to walk in it, much less sleep in it. There's a legend that floats around the St. James that says that there have been a few times that the room was rented out, and the guests there were victims of very mysterious deaths. Gavin says, I have a bullet that can get you a drink. Room 17 is pretty busy as well. Typically seen here is Henry's second wife, Mary Elizabeth. She's said to remain at the hotel as a protector. Mary gave birth to all of her kids there in the hotel, and she died there as well in December 1926. Now, allegedly, Mary's rose-scented perfume can often be smelled there in her old room. Sometimes an insistent tapping is heard when the window is open, and it will not stop until that window is closed. So apparently she doesn't like the windows open. On other occasions, they have people who have actually spotted a very misty, transparent form of what they assume to be Mary there in her room going on about her business. Now, another spirit that hangs out there is this dwarf-like old man, and the staff have named him the Little Imp. The spirit is said to be very mischievous, not harmful, not malevolent, but he's always playing tricks and laughing at the staff, and on one occasion he was said to have stuck a knife into the floor between the two owners of the old inn. Most often, he's usually blamed for things that just mysteriously disappear and, of course, show up somewhere where they have absolutely no business being later on. Now, of course, there are many other unknown entities that roam the hotel, creating a host of paranormal activities. Staff reports that items constantly fall off walls and shelves, and, of course, electrical equipment at the front desk misbehaves erratically. Other folks have reported cold spots and lights that turn off and on by themselves, faucets that turn off and on by themselves, feelings of being watched by unseen eyes, and cameras that don't work inside the hotel, but as soon as you walk outside, they function with no problem whatsoever. Now, this little dude named Cody Mutz, he was a college student that's worked summers at this hotel for like forever. But he said in 2002 he was working at the front desk one day, and he's into whatever he's doing, and all of a sudden he hears this high-pitched screaming coming from the other corner of the lobby. So, of course, he looks up from what he's doing, and there's nobody there. So he's looking around to try to figure out what the hell all the screaming was about. And on the opposite side of the lobby, there are 3 or 4 guests that just kind of standing there talking amongst themselves like nothing happened. So apparently they never heard that loud scream that he did, because they had been completely unfazed. Now, the hotel has 13 historic rooms that they've kept original. They're all named for famous and infamous people who stayed there. But later on, they did add this annex that offers an additional 10 rooms. Now, the hotel itself is still decorated back in the day. There's these antique chandeliers and velvet drapes and thick carpets that cover the original old wood floors, brocade wallpaper, and many of the original furnishings of the hotel as it came up. So one of the coolest artifacts that's there is sitting on a desk by the front desk. It's the old register where you can actually look at it and see the signatures of many historical characters that stayed there. Now, in the annex rooms, there are no phones, or in the original rooms, there are no phones, no radios, no TV, nothing out of the ordinary for something that was built back in the 1800s. Of course, in the 10 annex rooms, they have all the amenities of a modern hotel. But a lot of the facets of this hotel they've tried to keep original. The old saloon, which is now used as the hotel's dining room, still holds the original antique bar. Now they kept most of the ceiling, what they could refurbish. It's that pressed tin stuff that you see in those old fancy hotels back in the day. And if you look real close at that ceiling, you can still count 20 some odd bullet holes that are in that refurbished pressed tin. Gotta be kind of cool to see that. In the hallway of the hotel, there's actually a plaque that commemorates Clay Allison and the roster of 19 men that he was said to have killed there, as well as photographs of many of the famous guests that have stayed there in this historic inn. Also in the hallway is the original headstone of Parson Franklin J. Tolby, the beloved minister of Cimarron who was killed during the Colfax County War. This dude likely held services for many of the folks who were murdered here at St. James. I'm not real sure that that's a cool thing to have him just kind of hanging out in the hallway there. I'm sure he makes it very active. Speaking of active and screams that come from out of nowhere, I got a cool little urban legend that I'm going to tell you about before we wrap it up for the night. It's called the Screaming Skull of Burton Agnes Hall. You guys ever heard of this? Google it. It's a pretty cool legend. So, if you're from England or you've been to or at least heard of the Burton Agnes Hall, it's an Elizabethan manor house. Pretty much dominates the entire village of Burton Agnes. It's very near what they call Driffield in East Yorkshire. But when you may not have known is that trapped somewhere behind the walls of this historic old building is said to be a possessed human skull, along with the ghost of a headless woman known as Ode Nance. There is a little bit of activity going around up here this evening. Kind of interesting. Seeing little things darting around all over the place. Pretty cool. It happens. Change of seasons, things get very active. So here we are. If you guys see anything moving around behind me, let me know. Might need to turn the table, put the skulls or the masks back in the camera view so you guys can kind of monitor those for me. So let's talk about the legend behind the madness. Somewhere between 1601 and 1610, Sir Henry Griffith financed the construction of what he intended to be the most elaborate manor house in the East Riding of Yorkshire. Sir Henry had 3 daughters, and the youngest of whom was named Anne Griffith. Initially, Anne would hang out around the manor while it was being built, and she was pretty much awestruck by watching the building take shape, and in the meanwhile, she was slowly growing more and more obsessed with it. So, one day, after having left the construction site, she was attacked by some thieves in a nearby park. They hit her on the head with a stick before hauling ass from the scene. So some of the villagers found her and they took her over to her sister's, but it was pretty much too late for her. She knew that she was going to die, so she made one last wish. Here are her final words as recorded. Sisters, never shall I sleep peacefully in my grave in the churchyard unless I, or part of me, at least remain here in our beautiful home as long as it lasts. Promise me this, dear sisters, that when I am dead, my head shall be taken from my body and preserved within these walls. Here let it forever remain, and no one account to be removed. And understand and make it known to those who in the future shall become possessors of the house that if they disobey this, my last injunction, my spirit shall, if so able and permitted to, make such a disturbance within its walls as to render it uninhabitable for others so long as my head is removed from its home. So, to keep the peace, her sisters agreed, but when it came down to it, they failed to keep the promise. Neither one of them could stand the thought of mutilating their sister's corpse and taking her head off, so they had her buried at the Burton Agnes Church. Well, soon after, the manor became haunted by strange moaning and weird sounds. It got really bad, and at some point, the servants refused to work there anymore. The sisters got tired of being plagued by these hauntings, so they decided to dig up Anne's corpse and do like they had promised. So they cut off her head, they take her skull back to the manor, and then everything was at peace. But that didn't last. One day, a skeptical maid decided she was tired of having to look at the skull every day, so she wraps it in a piece of cloth and throws it into a passing wagon that just happened to be full of nothing other than cow shit. Then something crazy happened. The horses started trembling, and they became unable to move. They were terrified. So the wagon seemed like it was just bogged down. The driver tried everything, but it was as if the wheels were stuck to the ground. And the maid, having stood there and watched all this go down, eventually figures she better admit to what she did and go get that skull and bring it back inside and fix things the way they were. So you'd think that once would have been enough, but not so much. Because years later, another owner, who was a relative of Sir Henry, decides he's going to bury this skull in the yard. Again, the halls of this manor echoed with wails and cries, and eventually the skull was dug back up, cleaned off, put back in its place within the manor. Well, later on, another relative living in the manor decided they too were tired of looking at this freaking skull every single day, but instead of being a dumbass and taking it out of the house, he had it bricked up in a wall. Best of both worlds. It would stay there forever. It was within the walls, but nobody'd ever have to look at it again. So that way there was also no threat that it would ever be removed. No one knows where the skull is inside the manor, though. But in one of the rooms, there's a portrait of Anne, and some really strange stuff goes down in this room. This one dude named John Biltons came to visit the manor one time, and he was brought into the room where Anne's portrait was, and he was supposed to stay the night there. So this dude's walking around checking out the room, and he's holding his candle up in front of this portrait while he's checking it out. So all of a sudden, his candle gets blown out. He tried several times to relight the candle, but it wasn't happening. Later that same night, he was awoke, but by these weird and violent noises in the room. It was then It was then when he went to haul ass from the room, and he saw the specter of a headless woman standing in the hallway. So, very cool little story there. Very cool things happening up here in the she cave this evening. It's all good. Used to it. I don't know if y'all are seeing anything moving around behind me, but I'm definitely seeing it in front of me on beside me. So, I have visitors this evening. It's all good, though. All right, folks, so that's a wrap for this evening's show. I hope you guys enjoyed all that haunted history and urban legends. I do take requests. Ask Jesse, because we just discussed one of his requests. Send me a message if there's anything that you would like to hear more on it, you would like for me to do a little research on. I like doing that. It's pretty cool to dig into some of those old tales and find out what happened before and after and during and all that good stuff. Also, don't forget to check out authorlyngibson.com. You can read a little bit about my books, which will be going on sale October 1 all the way through October 31st. Get ready to pick some of those up at special pricing. Midnight October 31, those books go back to regular pricing. So, yeah, make sure that you check that out. Also, if you missed the show, there will be it will be saved on my fan page here at Southern Horror Queen on Facebook, as well as my YouTube channel. I'll post a link to that later on. So, hope you guys have a wonderful weekend. Happy Halloween season to you. I love you guys. Y'all have a freaking awesome week, and thank you so much for tuning in and playing creepy with me this evening.